FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Today's show is brought to you by U.S. Gold Corp. U.S. Gold Corp is a U.S.-focused gold exploration and development company advancing high-potential projects in Wyoming and Nevada. U.S. Gold Corp has consolidated a district on Nevada's productive Cortex Trend and is advancing the Copper King project towards production in Wyoming, led by a team of prolific company builders and renowned explorers, including Dave Mathewson, who is directly responsible for several major Nevada gold discoveries. U.S. Gold Corp is well-capitalized and has an extremely tight share structure with less than 20 million shares outstanding and trades on the NASDAQ, a major exchange, under the ticker symbol USAU. To learn more, go to usgoldcorp.gold. That's usgoldcorp.gold.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 5/6/19. Well, hey, economy is booming, supposedly. Job numbers through the roof, unemployment claims at all-time lows. What is a Democrat to do? And how much longer can this go on? Well, the media would like you to believe that nothing to see here, move along. And they were predicting major disaster when Donald Trump was elected. We were going to have a depression and all sorts of other horrible things. Well, they were wrong as usual. Anyways, our good friend is here with us, Frank Vernuccio. First, as always, feel free to email us. The address is kl@kerrylutz.com. So, Frank, welcome back. And, hey, the Trump economy just keeps, it's like Old Man River. It just keeps moving along.
Well, Kerry, I think I'm going to get my financial news from you rather than Paul Krugman, who you might recall when Trump got elected said that we're going to have a global recession with no end in sight. Turns out that Paul Krugman and a lot of other people on the left were absolutely wrong. In fact, the economy has made a major turnaround under the Trump administration. Who knew that freeing the economy from high taxes and regulations would actually allow capitalism to prosper?
Yeah, what a shock. I mean, I can't even believe it. Well, just the amazing thing is what he's been able to do, Frank, with almost no support from his own party.
That's exactly right. We talked for years about the possibility of having a president who wasn't a dyed-in-the-wool member of the Democrat or Republican parties. We got one, and his own party, the party that elected him, the Republican Party, treated him as the outsider that indeed President Trump actually is. Of course, most of the media pundits who talked about how great an outsider president would be rapidly turned against this administration simply because he didn't tote the typical left-wing perspective. He came in with a businessman's perspective, which of course was a real shock to a system that had been used to Washington Uber all. And it actually turned out to work for the economy. We're seeing a better GDP than we've seen in forever. We're seeing unemployment rates fall through the roof to a 49-year low, I believe. We are seeing women, minorities, including blacks and Latinos, with historically low unemployment rates. You would think, Kerry, that at some point the media would say, the guy's doing a decent job, but they are almost totally silent on the issue.
Amazing, isn't it, huh? The silence is deafening. And there's so many other statistics that show. But one thing haven't gotten a control over is the debt, right? I mean, the debt is still increasing at, at major increases every day.
The debt has become a problem that's not going to be solved basically by one or two pieces of legislation. We have inherent built-in costs that simply are going to take generations to address and generations to redress. We're looking at, for example, at many social welfare costs, which have gotten out of hand. And Kerry, one of the issues that doesn't get discussed often enough is that the state and local governments can do things for their own people in terms of benefits, in terms of social welfare, in terms of various programs that the federal government can simply not do efficiently. You can't run a 50-state system that's going to be equitable to everybody in it. If you send $1 to Washington, you're lucky if 25 cents actually gets directed to the proper source or the proper end goal. Now, state governments and local governments are far from perfect, but I think you're going to do better than about 25% efficiency rate return. So when Washington took on all of those expenses, all of those programs in education and things of that sort, that would be far better left to the individual states. You had inherent built-in inefficiencies which are bankrupting the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing is that everything is so inefficient that the government does, and yet the people have been conned into believing that everything that ails them, everything that's wrong with the country, can be solved by the very government that effectively created most of it. I mean, how do you figure this out here?
Well, there's an interesting political equation to all of this. A lot of state parties, most state parties, are generally run by elected officials at the state level, governors, for example. They want to avoid being the bad guy, raising the taxes and doing that sort of thing. So they want to pass a lot of these expenditures on to the federal government, despite the fact that the feds are going to be a lot more inefficient in doing it. So it's good politically for the governors and the legislative leaders, but bad for the country as a whole. It promotes inefficiency on a massive scale. And of course, you can even make the argument that the private sector is so much more efficient in doing things like creating jobs than the federal government could ever be. But we've gotten into this terrible habit, perhaps going over the past 80 to 90 years, of assuming that Washington can solve all of our problems. Instead, it's exacerbated those problems. And indeed, Kerry, it's institutionalized the problems. You have an entire government industry built up around social welfare programs or on things of that sort, which it's going to take a lot of work to get those entrenched bureaucrats the heck out of the way.
Yeah. So how do you get them out of the way?
Well, you're not going to do it overnight, unfortunately. I think President Trump has tried to bring in a business perspective to this, but there's so many vested interests, and we've found, just as you mentioned previously, Kerry, that entrenched interest is in both political parties. We know, for example, that those first 2 years of the Trump administration, when the Republicans had both the House and the Senate, that Republicans, particularly in the House of Representatives, stood in the way of many of the initiatives that President Trump was trying to put in that could have addressed a lot of these institutionalized problems. Both political parties have a real issue with getting rid of the gravy train of big federal programs where they could put their supporters and their contributors in and reap the benefits of that patronage.
Yeah, funny how that works, isn't it?
Absolutely. And again, it's an institutionalized problem that's going to take a long time and a lot of public support to really get rid of. We talk about how the government makes a mess of just about everything it tries to do, other than the things that the Constitution says it is supposed to do. We hear increasing cries from people on the left that they want to have a single-payer healthcare system. Well, take one look at the VA, and if that's what you want, well, God bless you, but I don't think that's what most people really want their healthcare system to look at. Look at examples around the world. Progressives and the left point to Great Britain as a wonderful example of nationalized healthcare and how that works. Well, if you talk to someone in England or Scotland or Wales, they're going to tell you that if they have the money, they come to the United States for their health care. They could wait months, even years, for vitally needed health care under the National Health Service system of the UK. It doesn't work. It can't work. And yet you have people on the left who are trying to do that right here in the United States.
Yeah, so we know it can't work, and yet it doesn't stop them from trying, does it?
No, it doesn't. One of the things that you find in politics, particularly on the left, is that they're more interested in pushing their philosophy rather than getting actual results. Isn't that amazing? You talk to big city mayors and you say, what's the most efficacious way of accomplishing something? And they'll give you an entire diatribe on the unions and what their place in it all is without telling you about the end results. So what we've seen in our national economy, what crippled the national economy, particularly under the Obama years, was an end goal on the part of the politicians in charge of pushing their philosophy rather than getting actual results.
Mm-hmm. So where does that leave you, Joe Sixpack? What are you supposed to do here, Frank?
You want, more than anything else, you want a job. You want your savings to be secure. You want your house and your education to be affordable. What you got to do is, quite simply, look at the realities. The people who purport to represent labor in the United States, the people on the left, are actually working against the interest of Joe Sixpack and all the Joe Sixpacks across the country. You want to keep your taxes low. You want to keep your government out of your hair or out of your business. That's the type of thing you have to look for. When you see the ridiculous claims that the left is trying to push, it was one of the latest, by the way, that's gaining traction in the Democrat primaries, is something called Universal Basic Income, UBI for short. Just in the past week, the past several days, a study by a international trade union, the Public Services International Union, a very liberal type of organization, came out with a study that found that universal basic income, the thing that they're right now trying in California, the good old liberal state of California, is an absolute disaster that simply cannot work. You need to get away from these political schemes and start dealing with financial reality. When you're talking about things like universal health care, or you're talking about universal basic income, they simply can't work. There's no financial possibility of it working. Look at the numbers. It simply can't work. You need to get the government out of your hair, leave you to your own devices, low taxes, promote business, promote wealth, growth in employment. That's the way Joe Sixpack is going to survive and thrive.
Yeah, well, I agree with you there. Hopefully the country will come to a collective awakening that the way we've been doing things, the way the government has been working, has not been serving anybody's best interest, least of all the poor and the blue-collar working class citizens amongst us. It's really not working in anyone's interest except the people who are feeding off of it, which is corporate welfare. I mean, let's not forget that. It's something like $350 billion a year in corporate welfare, which is why it's a joke when we complain about other countries subsidizing companies like Airbus. Boeing gets billions and billions every year in government slush and overcharges on government contracts. So somehow we've got to scale it all back and not wind up throwing the country into a major depression in the process.
Well, that's right. And, part of the issues have been, I think, addressed fairly substantially by the Trump administration with his relations with China and the new trade talks. Hopefully we'll see some results from that. The high taxes, the ridiculous excess regulations all conspired to chase jobs off American shores. Reducing the corporate tax rate was a major step forward. Kerry, we had a tax rate that was higher than all of our trading partners, developed trading partners throughout the world. And with that high tax rate and with the excess regulations, particularly under the Obama administration, there was a lot of rather odd head scratching saying, gee, why are all these corporations leaving the country and taking their jobs with them? Well, could it be that they were paying ridiculous tax rates? Could it be that the regulations were so onerous as to make doing a business or performing a business a near impossibility? Well, you start addressing those issues, and now, as Trump has, those jobs are coming back. Those businesses are expanding. Look at just a couple of examples that we were told by the Obama administration were jobs in industries that were gone or going forever. We were told by President Obama that manufacturing jobs are not coming back, that you would have to have a magic wand to revive manufacturing in the United States. Manufacturing has now revived in the United States with the reduction of tax rates, with the reduction of some onerous regulations. That's a great thing. It's a great thing for Joe Sixpack. It's a great thing for the entire national economy. And by the way, it's also a great thing for our national security. I don't know by what measure people believe that you can keep a country secure without having a manufacturing base, but somehow some folks apparently believe that. So those are all important advances that we've seen just in the past 2.5 years.
All right. Well, interesting times ahead. Let's see what happens in the election a year from this November. It's right around the corner. Frank, we want to find out more about you and read your work. Where do we go?
Well, thanks for asking. It's at usagovpolicy.com.
usagovpolicy.com. And as always, you'll find the link there in the show notes to Frank's site. Questions, comments, be a part of the show. Email us, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. Frank, always a pleasure.
Look forward to our next conversation, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.